There are moments in history when everything changes, when the universe holds its breath and watches as impossible choices become the only choices left. This is a story of people who refused to accept the end, who looked at certain death and decided to bet everything on one final gamble. It's about an ancient ship, a cursed planet, and a kind of courage that doesn't roar but whispers. Not today. The evacuation had failed spectacularly. Nobody wanted to say out loud, but everyone knew. 3 million souls had left Earth on 47 vessels, and now only one remained limping through the void. The Valiant Horizon was never meant to be humanity's last hope. She was a cargo hauler from colony wars, 2 centuries old, held together by welds and stubborn refusal to die. Her corridors smelled of recycled air and desperation. Her engines coughed like a dying man, but she was still flying, and that counted for something. Captain Tobias Durant stood in the command center, staring at the navigation display with hollow eyes. He hadn't slept in 4 days. The silver stubble on his jaw had grown wild, and his uniform hung loose on his frame. Behind him, the crew moved with quiet efficiency, each one carrying the weight of 3 million ghosts. They didn't speak much anymore. Words felt too heavy. The tactical officer, a sharp-eyed woman named Ria Alconquo, broke the silence. Her voice was steady despite the exhaustion written across her face. "Captain, they found us again. 6 Harvester-class destroyers dropping out of jump space. Distance, 400,000 kilometers in closing." Tobias closed his eyes for just a moment. The Dominion had been hunting them for 3 weeks, ever since the fall of Luna Station. The invaders called themselves the Crovathan Ascendancy, a civilization so old that human history was barely a footnote to them. Their ships moved like living things, organic and terrible, grown rather than built. They had torn through Earth's defenses like paper, harvesting entire cities, for reasons humanity couldn't even comprehend. Time until weapons range? Tobias asked. 17 minutes, Ria replied. 17 minutes. 17 minutes to live, unless he did something nobody had ever been crazy enough to try. The navigation specialist, a young man named Dmitry Volkov, was already shaking his head. He knew what the captain was thinking. Everyone on the bridge knew. "Sir, you can't be serious. The Tangle is a graveyard. 23 expeditions have gone in. None came back." The Tangle. That was what spacers called it, though the official designation was Theta Persei 4. A world so hostile that every advanced civilization in known space had marked it as forbidden territory. The planet existed in a permanent state of electromagnetic chaos, where technology went insane and reality itself seemed negotiable. Ancient forests covered continents, trees so massive they pierced a cloud layer, their root systems spreading for hundreds of miles underground. The planet was classified as a Class X biohazard, a place where ships vanished and crews were never found. "We jump there, we die," Dmitry continued, his accent thickening with stress. "We stay here, we also die. At least here is quick." Tobias turned to face his crew. There were 11 people on this bridge, and beyond them, 843 civilians packed into cargo holds and maintenance bays. Families, children, the last fragments of Earth. The Crovathan expect us to run. They expect us to keep jumping until our fuel runs out, and they can harvest us at their leisure. They won't expect us to dive into hell itself. The chief engineer, a broad-shouldered woman named Fatima Rousseau, spoke up from her station. Her hands were permanently stained with grease, and her laugh was the only thing that still sounded human in this nightmare. But she wasn't laughing now. "The Horizon systems are analog at their core, Captain. Pre-quantum computing, mechanical redundancies, magnetic tape backups. We built her stupid on purpose because she was meant to haul or through radiation belts. If any ship could survive the Tangle's interference, it's this old beast." Ria's fingers moved across her console, pulling up sensor data. The Crovathan ships are pure biotech. Neural networks, organic processing, quantum entanglement communication. That planet would shred their systems like wet tissue. Tobias looked at each of them in turn. "I won't order this. If we're doing this, we vote. Democracy seems appropriate for humanity's last decision." The vote was unanimous. Even the ones who thought it was suicide raised their hands. "Engineering, bring the jump drive online. Tobias commanded, his voice gaining strength. Navigation. Plot a course straight into the heart of that storm. Weapons. Arm everything we have left. If we're going to die, let's make sure we're not alone. The Valiant Horizon began to hum, a deep vibration that rattled through every deck. Warning lights blazed red as the ancient jump drive cycled up, pulling power from every non-essential system. In the cargo holds, civilians felt the shift and knew something had changed. Parents held their children closer. The elderly closed their eyes and remembered Earth as it had been. On the bridge, the countdown began. 10 seconds to jump. 9. 8. The Crovathan destroyers accelerated. Sensing their prey was about to escape, weapons charged with sickly green light. 5. 4. 3. For Earth, Tobias whispered. 2. 1. The universe twisted. Space folded. The Valiant Horizon vanished from normal space and plunged into the nightmare coordinates of Theta Persei 4. Reality screamed. The jump felt wrong from the first microsecond. Space didn't fold cleanly. It tore. The Valiant Horizon tumbled through dimensions that shouldn't exist, and every person aboard felt it in their bones, a sensation like falling and drowning and burning all at once. Emergency lighting flickered. Gravity failed for 3 eternal seconds. Then the ship slammed back into real space with violence that threw everyone against their restraints. Tobias tasted blood. His vision swam as he fought to focus on the displays. Around him, the crew struggled to their stations, checking systems, calling out damage reports. But it was a view screen that made his breath catch in his throat. The tangle filled their vision like a nightmare made solid. The planet was massive, easily twice Earth size, wrapped in swirling clouds that pulsed with their own bioluminescent light. Lightning that wasn't quite lightning danced between cloud layers in colors that hurt to perceive. And beneath those clouds, visible through brief clearings, stretched a forest. Trees, except calling them trees was like calling the ocean a puddle. They were titans, each 1 kilometers tall, their trunks wider than city blocks. They grew so dense that from orbit they looked like a solid surface, a carpet of twisted black wood, and leaves that shimmered with an oily iridescence. The canopy moved even from this distance, undulating in patterns that suggested intelligence, purpose, hunger. Mother of God, Fatima breathed. Sensors are going insane. I'm getting readings that say the planet is both solid and liquid. Temperature fluctuates between -200 and +400 degrees every few seconds. Gravity is behaving like it can't decide what number it wants to be. Rio worked frantically at her console. The interference is worse than predicted. I can barely maintain a lock on our own hull. Communications are completely scrambled. We're blind and deaf out here, Captain. Dimitri's hands shook as he tried to stabilize their orbit. Something is pulling at us. Not gravity. Something else. The ship wants to go down there. Before Tobias could respond, new alarms shrieked. 6 massive shapes dropped out of jump space behind them. The Crovathan destroyers had followed, their organic hulls pulsing with bioluminescent veins. Weapons already charging. They were beautiful in the way that deep-sea predators were beautiful, all elegant lethality and absolute confidence. Then the tangle reached up and grabbed them. It happened so fast that the human crew barely registered it. Electromagnetic pulses erupted from the planet's surface. Waves of interference so powerful they were visible as distortions in space itself. The Crovathan ships convulsed. Their organic systems, so perfectly evolved, so utterly superior to human technology, began to fail catastrophically. Neural networks that spanned entire ships started firing at random. Weapons discharged into empty space. One destroyer simply tore itself apart from the inside, organic matter rupturing as its own biology turned against it. The remaining 5 vessels tried to retreat, but the tangle wasn't finished. Gravity fluctuations caught them like insects in a web, pulling them into decaying orbits. One ship made it halfway to jump distance before something on the surface, something massive and ancient, sent a pulse that made reality hiccup. The destroyer vanished, not destroyed but simply erased, as if it had never existed at all. Holy hell, Rio whispered. The planet is fighting them. It's fighting everything, Fatima corrected, her eyes wide. We're just too primitive to notice. Our systems are analog, mechanical, stupid. The Crovathan are all biotech and quantum processing. To this place, they're a 5-course meal, and we're the mold on the bread, not worth eating. The Valiant Horizon shuddered as another electromagnetic wave passed through them. Lights dimmed. Several displays went dark, but the core systems held. The ancient mechanical computers kept churning, magnetic tape spinning in their housings, vacuum tubes glowing with honest photons. Tobias made a decision that would haunt him or save him. Take us down, into the canopy. If we stay in orbit, the planet will eventually notice us. On the surface, we might be small enough to hide. You want to land on that? Dmitri gestured at the nightmare below them. I want to survive long enough to think of a plan that doesn't involve immediate death. Engineering, can we make it? Fatima ran calculations on a slide rule of all things. The old tool was more reliable than any computer in this chaos. Maybe atmospheric entry will be rough. The canopy will be rougher. But the horizon was built to take a beating. Just pray the planet doesn't decide we're worth swatting. The descent began. The ship's heat shields glowed red as they hit the upper atmosphere. But the real terror started when they reached the clouds. The electromagnetic storms were worse up close, visible as crawling masses of purple and green lightning that seemed to chase them. The Valiant Horizon bucked and rolled. In the cargo holds, people screamed. Emergency webbing strained. An elderly man's heart gave out from the stress, and there was nothing anyone could do but hold him as he died. Then they hit the canopy. Branches thicker than starship hulls scraped across their belly armor. Something living and massive scattered from their path, a creature the size of a skyscraper that vanished into forest depths. The hull shrieked with the sound of tortured metal. A piece of the port stabilizer tore away. But Dimitri's hands were steady on the controls, guiding them down through gaps that seemed impossibly small, threading the needle through a forest that wanted them dead. The Valiant Horizon crashed into a clearing with enough force to crack 3 decks. The impact drove the breath from everyone's lungs. Then stillness. Horrible, waiting stillness. Tobias unbuckled with trembling hands. Damage report. The reports came in waves. Hull breached in 7 places, but holding atmosphere. Main engines offline, but not destroyed. Weapon systems functional. Life support struggling, but operational. Casualties, 37 dead, 92 injured. It could have been so much worse. Outside, the forest moved. Through the view screen, they could see trees that defied sanity, their bark flowing like slow water, their leaves breathing in synchronized patterns. The ground itself seemed alive, covered in a thick carpet of moss that pulsed with its own heartbeat. Creatures moved in the shadows, things with too many legs, with eyes that glowed in impossible spectrums, with geometries that made the mind flinch away. Ria's voice was barely a whisper. We're being watched. She was right. Every sensor they still had was picking up movement, attention, curiosity. The forest knew they were here. It was deciding what to do about them. High above, barely visible through the canopy, the remaining Crovathan destroyers continued their death spiral. One by one, they struck the forest and were swallowed by it. The planet consumed them completely, leaving no trace. Tobias stood and addressed his crew. We're alive. Against every rational expectation, we're alive. Now comes the hard part. We need to turn this wreck into a fortress because you could be certain the Crovathan won't stop coming. They'll send more ships. And when they do, this forest might decide we're worth eating after all. Nobody spoke, but in their eyes, he saw something that had been absent for weeks. Not hope, exactly. Something harder. Something more useful. The determination of people who had already survived the impossible and were willing to do it again. 3 days passed in the belly of that impossible forest, and nothing attacked them. That silence was more terrifying than any assault could have been. The crew worked around the clock, sealing hull breaches with whatever materials they could salvage, reinforcing structural supports with cut timber from the smaller trees near the clearing. The wood was strange, dense as steel, but somehow still alive even after being cut. Its surface warm to the touch like flesh. Tobias barely left the bridge, except to walk among the survivors. He needed them to see him, needed them to believe that leadership still meant something in this place where all the old rules had died. In the cargo holds, he found families huddled together, children with haunted eyes who no longer cried because tears felt pointless. He found artists sketching the alien landscape through portholes, trying to make sense of beauty and horror combined. He found engineers who sang old songs while they worked, melodies from Earth that felt like prayers now. A young girl, maybe 7 years old, approached him during one of these walks. Her name was Piper, and she carried a stuffed rabbit that had seen better days. "Mr. Captain," she said, her voice small but steady. "Are we going to die here?" Tobias knelt down to her level. He could have lied. Perhaps he should have. But something about this child deserved honesty. "I don't know, Piper, but I do know that humans are very good at surviving in places we're not supposed to. We're stubborn that way." She considered this seriously, then nodded. "My dad says stubborn is just another word for brave when things are scary." "Your dad is a wise man. He died on Earth," she said matter-of-factly. "But I remember what he said." Tobias felt something crack inside his chest. He pulled the girl into a gentle hug, and she let him, this tiny human, carrying grief bigger than her whole body. When she walked away, clutching her rabbit, he had to stand there for several minutes before he could trust his voice again. On the 4th day, the Crovathan came back. Not ships this time. They had learned. Instead, they sent drop pods, primitive by their standards, shielded capsules designed to punch through the interference and deploy ground forces. Sensors picked up 37 impacts scattered around their position, each one carrying warriors bred for conquest. Rhea coordinated the defense from her station. They're adapting, Captain. Smaller units, hardened against electromagnetic interference. They'll hit us from multiple angles. Tobias activated the ship-wide communication system. His voice echoed through every deck, every hold, every cramped corridor where people waited. "This is Captain Durant. The enemy is coming. I won't pretend this will be easy, but I need you to remember something. Those things out there, they see us as primitives, as lesser beings. They think our technology is crude, our weapons outdated, our courage insufficient. They're about to learn how wrong they are." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "We didn't ask for this war. We didn't choose to be the last humans standing. But here we are, and I'll tell you what I believe. I believe that every person on this ship matters. Every welder who sealed a breach, every medic who saved a life, every parent who kept their children calm, every child who found the strength to be brave. You are humanity now, all of it, and humanity has never been very good at dying quietly." Outside, the first Crovathan warriors emerged from the forest. They were nightmares given form, 3 meters tall, covered in chitinous armor that flowed like liquid. Their weapons were grown into their bodies. Plasma cannons fused to their arms, blades extending from their wrists like natural claws. They moved with terrible grace, perfectly adapted killing machines. The Valiant Horizon's defense turrets opened fire, not energy weapons, which the forest interference would scramble, not missiles guided by computers that couldn't function properly, just bullets. Simple, stupid, mechanical bullets fired by systems so primitive they might as well have been medieval catapults by galactic standards. The Crovathan had shields designed to stop lasers, plasma, particle beams. They had never considered bullets. The first warrior took 3 rounds to the chest and went down, his armor cracking like pottery. The second lost an arm. The third died before it understood what was killing it. But there were dozens more. They adapted quickly, using the massive trees as cover, advancing in coordinated patterns. Some made it close enough to fire their weapons at the ship. Plasma bolts splashed against the hull, melting armor, starting fires. The Valiant Horizon groaned but held. Then the forest decided to participate. A Crovathan warrior stepped on what looked like solid ground and plunged through suddenly liquid earth. Vines erupted from the moss, wrapping around another invader and pulling into the canopy, where something with too many mouths waited. A tree bent, impossibly, and swatted a warrior aside with a branch the size of a train car. The planet was killing them, not defending the humans exactly, just killing everything that didn't belong. Fatima's voice crackled over the communication system. "Captain, I have an idea. It's completely insane, but so is everything else about the situation." "Talk to me," Tobias replied, firing a sidearm through a breach in the hull at a Crovathan trying to climb aboard. "The forest hates advanced technology, but it tolerates us because we're primitive. What if we go even more primitive? What if we fight them the way humans fought before we had spaceships? Get down in the dirt with them?" Tobias understood immediately. "You want to send people outside." "I want to send volunteers outside with weapons that won't make the planet angry. Rifles, blades, explosives on timers. Low-tech warfare. Let the forest see we're not a threat to it, while we make ourselves very much a threat to the invaders." It was madness. It was also their best chance. Tobias called for volunteers. He expected a handful of soldiers, maybe some desperate souls with nothing left to lose. Instead, he got 200 people. Parents who wanted their children to have a tomorrow. Engineers who understood that sometimes you had to get your hands dirty. Artists who had decided beauty was worth fighting for. Even Piper's mother stepped forward, her jaw set with determination. They armed themselves with whatever they could find. Hunting rifles from the ship's recreation supplies. Welding torches converted into flamethrowers. Knives, axes, tools turned into weapons. They painted their faces with mud and moss, covering themselves in the forest scent, and then they went outside. The battle that followed wasn't graceful or heroic in the traditional sense. It was brutal, desperate, and absolutely human. They used the terrain, the chaos, the planet itself as weapons. They set traps using the forest's own predatory nature, leading Crovathan warriors into areas where the ground dissolved or creatures hunted. They fought in pairs and groups, covering each other, adapting on the fly. A mechanic named Hassan took down a warrior twice his size by using a magnetic grapple to short out its armor. A teacher named Violet threw homemade grenades that worked because they were too simple to fail. A musician named Jerome played a trumpet to coordinate movements, the sound cutting through interference when radios couldn't. They lost people, good people, brave people, but they won. When the last Crovathan warrior fell, torn apart by both bullets in the forest itself, the humans stood bloodied and exhausted in the clearing. They had defended their home. This impossible place had become home because they had bled for it. Tobias watched the sun set to the canopy, painting the sky in colors Earth had never known. Around him, people tended wounds, shared water, told stories about the ones who hadn't made it. They were survivors, not because they were stronger or smarter or more advanced than their enemies, but because they refused to quit. Because when the universe said die, they said not yet. And somewhere deep in the forest, in the ancient consciousness that lived in the roots and the soil, the Tangle recognized them. These small, fragile, impossibly stubborn creatures who fought with primitive tools and unbreakable will. The planet had seen empires rise and fall and consumed countless species. But these humans were different. They didn't try to conquer the forest. They just tried to survive alongside it. The forest decided it could tolerate that. Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. Sonnet 4.5.